Hi everyone, I am Jason Alcott, author of The Sewing Principle. So glad you're here today. Today I want to dive into a concept that comes out of Jim Collins' book, Good to Great. Great book if you haven't read it. Definitely one to add to your library, but he has this concept in there called the flywheel. And it's this incredibly powerful tool, both in organizations and in your personal life. There's something really great here for you to take, hopefully some awesome takeaways for you to apply. Let's dive in. So imagine with me for a moment, a huge, massive flywheel. I'm talking like 30 feet in diameter. Let's say it's a couple of feet thick. And let's say it weighs like 5,000 pounds and it's mounted horizontally like this. And your mission is to get this flywheel moving around its axis. So it's mounted in such a way and you can kind of grab an edge of it and start pushing. But I mean, this thing weighs 5,000 pounds and your goal is to get it moving as fast as possible, as many rotations as possible. And so you start pushing. And let's say it takes you 1, 2, maybe 3 hours to complete that first full rotation. But then slowly it starts to pick up a little bit more speed. You're still putting in the effort, you're still putting in the work, but you're starting to get around a little bit faster and a little bit faster and a little bit faster and a little bit faster until all of a sudden it just takes on a life of its own. It just hits that breaking point and it just runs. It can't be stopped. It's just moving and moving and moving and moving. So much speed and momentum has been created that the flywheel is just almost moving on its own. Just like the merry-go-round back when you were at the playground as a kid, right? This thing just takes on a mind of its own. It's just moving. And somebody comes along and asks you the question, they say, so what push was it that pushed it over the edge, that like created that momentum, that created that breakthrough? Like which push was it? Was it the first push? Was it like the 10th push? Was it like the last push? Like which one was it? And you're like, hold on a second, what are you talking about? It was all of them. It was everything combined. And so when you think about this question, somebody coming along and saying, well, when was the moment of transition? When things went from, the case of his book, Good to Great, when things went from sort of one way to all of a sudden, maybe there's a dramatic results and you see it in organizations, you see it in personal lives. And he said it's a lot like the flywheel example because somebody comes along from the outside and they only see the finished result or they only see the dramatic change. But being on the inside of the organization or the person who's making the change, it feels a lot more like that effort of however many pushes it took to get around, to get that thing moving. And it wasn't one single push that pushed it over the edge. It was a combined, consistent effort. And this is what I really want to draw out of this is that from the outside, we're looking at these massive changes, transformations, whether that be in an organization or on a personal level. You know, somebody's winning in their finances and their relationships, their health, whatever it is. And you're like, wow, I wonder what they did. Because from the outside, we see the transition. And Jim says it this way. He says, we've allowed the way that transitions appear on the outside to drive our perception of what they must feel like on the inside. So from the outside, it looks like this massive dramatic transformation, but from the inside, from the person that's actually making the change or the organization that's actually making the change, it's actually a lot slower. Dare I say almost boring because it's just consistent effort, consistent pushing in the right direction for such a consistent and long period of time to be able to create the momentum that it almost seems imperceptible, right? Like you don't actually notice all the tiny, minute changes standing up until all of a sudden that momentum is released. Jim gives this really funny example in the book. He says, picture an egg. It's just sitting there. And all of a sudden it cracks and a chicken jumps out. And everybody loses their mind going, incredible transformation. You know, it was an egg and now it's a chicken. And this is amazing. You got to see this, you know, that just like, boom, just like that. All of a sudden, egg one moment, chicken the next, right? That's the perspective from the outside. But from the inside, what was the chicken's perspective? That was hilarious. Like, I don't know. I've never thought about the chicken's perspective. Well, it was a heck of a lot slower, right? Growing up to the point where it's actually going to be able to crack out of the egg and grow and go out into the world. Very slow process. Not like that transformation from coming inside of the egg to the outside of the egg. Looks incredible from the outside. Totally different from the inside. This is what's happening in organizations. This is what happens in your personal life. You're looking for that moment of cracking through, but the reality is all the growth happened on the inside of the egg and nobody saw it. The same thing happens with you. So what does a flywheel actually look like? Jim outlines it from an organizational perspective, and I want to kind of walk through that, and I want to tie it back into your own personal life. Like, how can you use this as a tool in your tool belt? You know, from an organizational perspective, he says, you know, you start out at the top of the flywheel and you've got your organizational sort of goals. He calls it the hedgehog, which is a whole nother concept, but you know, the values, what it is that you're driving towards, and you start to push in that direction, and then you start to accumulate some small wins, right? And then because you've got some small wins, you actually have people that want to sort of be a part of the team, right? Coming down to the bottom of the flywheel, people that want to be part of it, and now you start to gain some momentum, which pushes you further around the flywheel back up to that direction of goals, and now you're collecting more wins because the team's growing, and all of a sudden you start to create this flywheel. It takes a long time, but it's centered around that idea of like having a vision and a goal, and then having these small wins. In your personal life, I see it the exact same way. God's giving you a vision, an impact that he wants to have through your life. He's giving you a vision of your identity, the person that he wants you to become. And you've got these ideas, and you just need to start to take the steps that are necessary to move you in the direction of becoming that person, to move you in the direction of that goal and dream. We all know this. You know instinctively that's what you need to do. We've talked on these videos about taking those initial first steps. If you take Jim's paradigm here, you look at it and you go, okay, so then what I need to do is I need to collect the small wins. You got to pick out the points in your life where you're actually getting wins in the direction that God's calling you towards. Start to collect them and celebrate them in your life. That's going to drive momentum. It's going to make you go, man, we're actually making progress. So often, though, I think we look past the small wins looking for the big win, right? Charles Duhigg's the author of The Power of Habit. He says there's this science around small wins, celebrating small wins. He calls it the science of celebrating small wins. And I love that idea. There's something incredibly powerful by pulling out the small wins and recognizing them and celebrating them in our life, because that gives us fuel, provides us momentum to kick the flywheel back over the top to say, yes, I am making progression towards these values. I am making progression towards this identity that God's calling me to, this impact and vision that God's given me. So this is definitely an area where I've fallen down many, many times in the past, where I'm looking for the big win. But if I celebrate the small wins, it'll allow me to keep that momentum going. It'll keep me motivated to keep moving in the right direction. Because if you just celebrate all the failures or how you're missing the mark all the time, then nobody wants to continue forward, right? Like, you don't want to continue forward in that environment, but there are small wins there to be celebrated. And so I love this idea. Grab that in the flywheel. You've got the vision. You've got the direction that God wants you to move in. Start taking the steps and then celebrate the small wins and allow that momentum to carry you up and through until all of a sudden it's just carrying through in your life in this flywheel motion. I've seen the flywheel in action in my own life, in businesses that I've had the opportunity to work with. I've seen it in action in the Sewing Principle, the book, and the writing of that book, publishing of that book, and the momentum that it eventually has gained and carried on its own. I've seen it in my own personal life, in my physical health, like in actually being active and working out. There's been points in my life where I felt like that flywheel has really been moving. There's been a lot of momentum there. It's been really simple and straightforward for me to be able to carry forward that part of my life. You can feel the momentum. Right now, full transparency, I'm creating that momentum again. We just recently had our baby girl. She's about 7 months old now. I'm back at that point where I've got to create that momentum. It's a little bit more laborious, but I'm celebrating the small wins. I'm celebrating the days of consistency and actually being able to get out and work out or be physically active, or how many times I did it a week, or for how long, or whatever that looks like, right? Celebrating those small wins, it's going to carry me back through so that I know eventually it gets to the point where my body actually craves it. It needs to get moving. It needs to be working out and actually feeling better and feeling healthier, right? All of those things start to work together. These flywheels are available in so many different areas of our life. It can be in our relationships with our spouse. It can be in our relationship with our kids, in our work, in our physical fitness, in our healthy, and how we're eating, right? Creating that positive momentum, creating that flywheel in all these different areas of your life is an incredible tool to add to your tool belt. So take this, remember this, look at areas of your life where you want to create flywheels of momentum so that incredible things can happen. I'm so excited about everything that God is doing in and through you, and I can't wait for the opportunity to connect with you again next week. Have a blessed rest of your day. We'll talk to you soon.